Was there no audio to that? There was no.
Oh, no, I didn't hear anything.
Oh, um, that's okay. We'll play that in the outro. All right. Today we have somebody who can't use Restream and Mother Desiccant for the first time. Sorry about the no music. That was my John Cage moment, and just gonna roll with it.
Very thoughtful, very thought-provoking.
It was a very good sound. Probably you'll never know. Maybe after the show. So first, let's do some intros. Let's see, what did I write? Who are you, and what module would get you stopped by the authorities?
Oh my gosh. And that's really funny. I actually have two NobCon stories about the authorities at the airport. One going there and one coming back. And I did think about the answer to this. I was just going to take the obvious answer of the radioactive random source that ERD makes,
Mm-hmm.
but
That one would definitely get you stopped.
definitely would. But so coming to NobCon, I was surprised that I didn't get stopped by the authorities because everybody I think has seen that picture, like just that JPEG that makes its way around to the guy visibly explaining to a TSA agent what a modular synthesizer
Yes. Yeah.
is. And so when I was bringing it through security, I'm like, here we go. I'm going to have my moment. And they ran it through this thing that took like a 3D scan of the entire box. Like this 100 HP black hole case was my my carry-on. Oh, it's my boyfriend. Always needs to show up on camera. Um, he uh, he always does that. So anyway, him and I are waiting in line, and it goes through this 3D scan, and it builds this 3D map of like the case, like all of the wires, everything inside of it, all of the components, and they're looking at it, and we can see like over the person's shoulder that they're taking a 3D scan of my device, and I'm over here just like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Because it's like this like 3D map of like
Can
this
I
device
have this
that I
when
made,
you're
all the
done?
wires. Oh yeah, and then they ran this Alienware through it, and we were sitting there just geeking out over it, and the TSA agent was just looking back at us like, yeah, it's cool. It's pretty cool, isn't it? And then on the way back, though, when I probably should have been stopped by the TSA, was so before getting on the flight, I bought like a 1 liter bottle of water. Um,
Oh.
yeah, I'm gonna tell the water bottle story. I brought a 1 liter bottle of water, and I say it was sealed, sealed container. I bought it at the airport. So we wait forever, and we get to the front of O'Hare, and they're like, "You got to throw out the water bottle." I'm like, "It's sealed. I bought it at the airport." They're like, "You got to throw it out." So I walk over to the trash can, and before I throw it out, some context. I was a very lazy teenager, and I learned to pour soda directly down my throat because I didn't want to clean a glass. So I could drink from 2 liters without needing to clean the glass when I was done. And I've just never lost that skill. So I just take the 1 liter and I just pour the entire thing into my throat. Just no gag reflex, no nothing. And just completely empty it into myself and then just throw it down into the garbage. And two of the TSA agents there, these two ladies working at TSA were just like,
That is very similar to my Iron Brew story. When I was leaving
oh,
Scotland, I did virtually the same thing with.
oh, with Iron Brew.
Oh yeah, I wasn't even drinking or anything, so it was a little bit wasted, but that's okay. um, yeah, I'm Hex7, host of the show, make modular music. I don't actually know. Maybe the one with the Nixie tubes, because it kind of looks sort of balmy. There's cables plugged into it. You got a countdown timer. They don't like things like that. They don't know how math works. Like they arrested that one kid who had like the DIY Arduino clock.
And
Anyway,
I probably shouldn't have introduced myself as a goblin towards the TSA. I'm Mother Desiccant, and I'm a dark ambient musician, um, as well as a general synthesizer overthinker.
yes, I I qualify for that latter bit too. For the stuff I care about, right? Like I'm
Oh yeah.
not like Benjamin Izzo, who we haven't seen in a while, like is an encyclopedia of modules, like incredible um,
Wow.
brain on that person. But I am not that way. Like the modules I am interested on, yeah, I've got down, but yeah, other than that, like yeah, we'll get into that. But what was I gonna say? Yeah, everyone should be a goblin to the TSA. Even if you work for the TSA, you should be a goblin to the TSA. Like this is just the way to do it. Like you should definitely annoy them. That's just my take on things because they're like if you can get money from them and you work for them, I'm not hating on you. I'm hating on the concepts. They're useless. They have cool tools though. I want a 3D scan of my system. I mean, I kind
Yeah.
of know what it looks like, but it'd be cool to have.
No, when they took it, I was just kind of like, it felt like I was at like a theme park. Like, hey, can I get like that out like in a poster so that I can just like put it up? I certainly have at least one case that I would like get that on like a movie size poster and hang it in my house over the
Right. You
instrument
can make a
control.
poster, you can make an animation, or like the semi-transparent
Oh
rotation type
yeah.
things, get real glitchy with it. Yeah, could be cool. Someone turn their 3D printer into a 3D scanner and hook us up, please. Yeah, so before I hit stream and failed miserably to change my audio, uh, which I was jamming out to. Um, we were talking a little bit about case design.
Yes.
So, Mother Desiccant is probably like one of like a handful of experts on case design. Um, hold on, I'm cramping up. Whew. All right. Not enough electrolytes. Anyway, an expert on case design has helped many folks, particularly with large cases, go through and make something usable. So I think that would be like a good topic. Like, one, how did you get into that?
Oh yeah. Well, I guess at first I got into it doing it for myself. My experience with Eurorack is, I think, universal. I got into it as a bit of an outsider. I was always like growing up. I was listening to the stuff coming out of Warp Records in the '90s, and the big explosion of trip hop after that. Super big fan of it. And so when I started making my own money and I could afford things like an Electribe and a Timberwolf, I started getting those and just amassing them in my room. And I didn't know what I was doing at all. I just liked making little things for myself and my friends and my various little projects.
Yeah.
But eventually, a friend is like, "Hey, I got a Moog Mother 32, and this thing's great. You should give this a try if you think synthesizers are neat." So I got it and had no idea what I was doing with it, and I just puzzled it out. I figured out how to use a Mother 32, and I'm like, well, this is cool. I think I'm starting to feel the limitations of it. I'd like to give it some friends.
Mm.
And yeah, I mean, you can like,
You got some friends.
yeah, yeah. Oh, it's got some friends. It's
Got
got
a
some
whole
friends, all
neighborhood.
right. And I think that that story is relatable to most people, where you start with a couple things and it's like, oh, we'll just start expanding a bit. And about $2,000 in, you ask yourself something very scary to say after spending $2,000 on anything, which is, what am I doing? What the heck am I doing? To put it in the parlance of the show.
Yeah.
So I thought about that really hard, and behind me are actually three Eurorack devices that I'm just focusing on making these three devices perfect. I do have like a smaller rack in that black hole case I was talking about that I take other places with just my smaller projects, but I want to get these three cases together, and then I'll probably work on a fourth one. Um, I have one that I actually, so I perform almost, I mean, they're bringing me back monthly now. So I guess I perform monthly on the Las
Yeah.
Vegas Art Walk with one of them. So one of them is a playable instrument. One of them, the one that's directly behind me here, is a something you can wire up for generative drone. And in fact, most of my albums were about half made on that and half made on a pedal board. And there's one over here, which is meant to be more of a collection show off, but also something for composition. This is where I'm putting like full systems. It's where I have the full Moog system. I got both. Oh gosh, Strymon. I got both Strymons in there. It's a little bit of a show off case. I also have most of my Instruo in there, but so that's my collector case, and I guess I'll get more into that later. But each one has its own little thing. That one makes space music. This one makes techno, and the one behind me makes the stuff I put on my albums. And the one I play live, I don't want to change. I think it's perfect. The one behind me, I think needs a reorganization, and the one to the left of me, still trying to track down just a couple things that might make it absolutely perfect. But I'm doing a no gear year to get totally in touch with the instrument and definitively decide what it needs and what it doesn't need.
Welcome to the team. I mean, I'm doing a no Euro rack specifically year, and the reason there's that stipulation is because Cosmo modules panels when they come out are pretty ephemeral, so I
Mm-hmm.
have a little asterisk there. But I have not bought anything this year. I've traded for a couple things.
Yes, trading is okay, especially when things break. I
Yeah.
actually had something break after our big move, and I was like, "Ah, geez, there goes my mimosa." And what are the chances of getting that from Russia right now? I'll just throw grids in there.
Yeah, I mean, I did get some stuff from Russia last year from Paratech, because I saw they were having a hard time, and I'd always wanted a few of those modules. But so it's possible, but
Mhm.
somehow I have no
Oh my
idea.
gosh. Like in my in my writing and just generally I try not to shill for modules, but oh my gosh, get a Chloe. They're so good.
Oh my gosh.
If you're looking to incorporate tubes, Chloe's are so good. They give you everything from Rammstein to like those Blade Runner brass timbers. If you envelope the LPG, it's so good.
That's awesome. Yeah, so I think when you get enough modules or enough cases, you get into a scenario where you're well, there's a limit. There's an upper limit to how many modules you get. Like, but if you still have like a usable amount of modules, like U cases are still pretty like small comparatively to some other folks, right? Like they're none of them are huge.
Oh no.
Um, in terms of like you don't have like three Needham cases filled with modules or anything like that.
Oh
Um,
no.
but you come into it, you start thinking about them. I start thinking about them. I think because more analytically, like what do I want to do with this specific case? Like what is this case like? What do I want to get out of it? What's that case going to be? This other case that's like lower down here, that's like my junk drawer case. Like that's my show off case where like I don't care if the panels are black, weird Cosmo modules, like that kind of stuff. Like totally not something I would take to a show, but like handy. And then I've got like tiny Euro rack or tiny Cosmo, which is just a huge Euro rack case that matches Cosmo's size. But I thought about like what I wanted each of these cases to do. Can they stand on their own? Like I've taken and performed with just Tiny Cosmo at a Freak Boutique when I happened to be in town, and it was like trivial to do because I've got it set up in a way where I've got easy voice, like I can use it easily. I don't have to jump through hoops. So yeah. Anyway, I think those are like common things. So I think there's like a synth case. Like, do you want it to be a synth? Well, synth sector. There's like ambient case where you're like not ambient, generative is a better way to put it, where you've got like I don't know some of the make noise stuff and like a handful of different sequences that are rowdy, things like that. Like that's sort of the pattern I started thinking about like when I want a case. I don't know, but what are the categories that you recommend? Like what are other people having you design for them?
So I've actually had a couple. I've had a couple good ones. One of them is just like you mentioned before, I have smaller devices, and the trade-off there is that they take up more horizontal space. But I like that I can take just one of them and have a jam with it without needing to involve everything. Um, it helps to not have that option paralysis, but also have that option that it's like, wish the maths was in here, but you don't need to stop yourself. If the maths is right next to it, I can just be like, well, I guess this one has to be a 2 case because my goals are getting a little big for the 1 case on this patch. And you can expand if you want to, but there's like a psychological effect that takes hold when you have the smaller case that you want to work within the boundary. You want to work within the square. And in patching that up, you wind up doing more synth wizard things and coming up with more of this just more talent. You develop more talent with a modular synthesizer, working with less resources, because you're never like, oh, I need envelopes. I have one up here. I got one over here, and it's like, oh, way up there, and it's not organized in any way, shape, or form. You're looking for, oh, I think I have a 4 HP one. It's in here somewhere. And when nothing is sorted, that's how things get lost. And like, how are you going to choose from those four, from those four ones that you have?
Well, backing up a bit, like when you have a small case, a couple of things are happening, right?
Mhm.
Like you're really limited. And when you switch to a large case, well, if you have a small case, you're going to fill it up, no matter
Mhm.
what. Um, but the same thing happens with the big case. If you get a big case, you are going to fill it up. That's
Oh
just
yeah.
what's going to happen. It's like no matter how big the signature box is on a tablet or a computer, you're always signing it bigger than the box. No matter how, it could be a wall sign. You do a huge thing. Like it's always, your signature is always bigger than the box allows for.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Fill the space is just such
yeah,
a strange, like, human sensation.
yeah.
I used to raise reptiles, and in that scene, it's called empty cage syndrome, where, like, oh, you had a baby snake and it grew up into a not a baby snake and it needed a bigger enclosure, and now you have the smaller enclosure which would fit a king snake. So you could go get a king snake at the reptile expo that's happening, and that's how you wind up with two snakes. But like, while you're at the reptile expo, they got like a morph that you like, and so it's like, well, I guess I'll get another snake, and then now you have three snakes, and then that snake outgrows the cheap cage that you got it, and so now you have an empty cage and three snakes, and you can see how this gets out of control, much like Eurorack does. You're like, oh man, I wish I had a fixed filter bank for just a mastering section, but I don't really have the room for it. So I'm just going to get a small case. And you can see how that mirrors that it's like that case outgrows it. It winds up as its own system. You have more. And I'm writing an unusual kind of synthesizer guide at the moment that addresses that issue. That I call it becoming an accidental collector, where it's so easy in Eurorack, where just $80 to $150 at a time when you're dealing with the entry level modules, it's like, oh, ooh, piece of candy, ooh, piece of candy, you know, ooh, piece of candy, and you're just picking them up, and you wind up with these things that you're not using, and you need to resell them, and then you resell them, but then you have money, and there's always money in the banana stand, and that goes into larger modules, and it just turns into a collection that you don't want necessarily, or don't understand, or is just too big to manage. And that's where the guide comes in. I'm writing a guide. I guess we'll roll into that point in the agenda here. So I'm currently writing a guide on how to design a modular synthesizer. Not a modular, not a module.
Not a
I'm not
module,
that
not a
good.
case, just like how you put all of those pieces together, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
putting all of those pieces together. And to answer your question before, some of the things that I have worked on, I did one for RYO. Wolfel, who is behind RYO, has been making music instead of making modules lately, and that's why they've been a little inactive. And they had this huge case, just a really big case that had two parts. It was like two dopes. It was like two dope for monsters stacked on top of each other or something, and then another one to the right of it. Because he runs RYO and he's got all of his own designs in there, including his logic section, which was blown up all over the place. And I know from talking to him that he does Logic drums on most of his music. So I'm like, why not bring this stuff together and have like a Logic brain? Like, so you have a Logic section where parts can play off of each other, or where you can program particularly complex drum patches. And that was how I got into this whole synth consultant thing, was helping Woeful RYO uh, redesign this huge case into something that made sense and could be played. And Woeful, of course, the thing is when you're still purchasing, it's still a living instrument.
Yeah.
So the way that I put it in the guide is, the reason why the Ramones were successful with 4 chords and they didn't learn anything else is because the guitar didn't change from gig to gig. If the guitar was changing on the Ramones from gig to gig, they probably couldn't have kept doing what they were doing. Like, they weren't bringing out 7 strings later in their career, to my knowledge. They weren't getting really fancy with it. They're just like, I know how to do a couple things on this, and I know how to do it well enough. And when you're practicing an instrument, if most people have practiced the guitar, or maybe if you were in band, you practiced brass. Imagine if there were new buttons and new options, new tones, new controls, new ways out of that instrument every 5th or 6th time that you interacted with it. It's impossible to learn that instrument. So you want those things to stay as static as you can, unless you're like, this needs to change for XYZ reasons. And then you need to go into a design phase where you're not trying to learn the instrument, but redesign it so that it can be learned in a different way. And how that took shape with Woeful is, Woeful took his favorite half of the case that I designed and completely separated it from the other half. He's like, I still play on that half completely separately from the other half that I've just been buying modules and making new prototypes and designing them.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how that took shape for Woeful, that he has like an instrument that is like reliable, that I helped him design. And then he's got that other one off to the side where he's like, this is the living instrument. And I think that that's a great balance to strike when you still want that living instrument, but you still want the practicable instrument on the side.
Right. And to clarify, like, there are folks who play modular differently, right? Like, there are folks who patch from scratch every time.
Yep.
And then there are folks like me who want to get into the music as fast as possible. So that's not really a thing I look at too much. And it sounds like in this case, I don't know if they patch from scratch, but like, they do have an instrument they want to keep making music on, which means there's probably some perma patchy bits to it.
And don't I know it? Once you like here, hold on just a moment. Like, once you have a good techno patch, oh, there goes my camera. Once you have a good techno patch, you don't want to unpatch it. It's like, well, this is good. We got it. All right, cool. Because as it turns out, techno's hard.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. It's simple, but yeah,
it's just like a whirring sound. You throw a bass drum on there, and then just make some hell noises and bang on a trash can, and there you go. You have techno. And then when you get in there and try to make it, it's like, this is hard. This is so much harder than I thought it was going to be to make something listenable. And so when you actually get that patch going that really speaks to you, where like you turn it on and just the tunes start pouring out of it, you want to keep it that way. So in the guide, I've detailed, or at least I've found, 5 kinds of synthesis, or at least 5 kinds of case, 5 goals. I call them paths. 5 paths that any synthesist is probably going to take. The first is Explorer, and that part of the guide is actually already in editing. It has to do with people who either just showed up and are kind of exploring this whole modular thing. Either they're not sure what they're doing and they're just now exploring this new sonic space, or the people who have larger cases and just they don't have a strict purpose other than interacting with their instrument. And that's fine. That's also fine. There's a lot of people like that. I imagine that there's a lot of explorers who do that just to calm down after a long day. I think that there's a lot of modular users right now who are just like glad to have an instrument that I can just go up, beep boop, make some zip zap sounds, and I'm not looking at a screen.
It's
There's a
nice
lot
to
of
have a
those I'm not looking at
conversation,
a screen explorers.
right? Like it's nice to have a conversation with the instrument, and
Yeah.
that's where I think exploration is fun because you could like that's why I like the original soft pop and the new one because they're like they don't work how you anticipate them working. The newer one works more so how you anticipate, but the old one's like pretty random when you first start using it, and it's fun to have that conversation with the thing.
Oh yeah. No, no, like starting out, like I still have that Mother 32. It's in my showcase case, actually. It's in my space music showcase case. And I still have it. I got it used from Guitar Center. It was it's still there. I love it to bits. I even had a moment, just this pure and wonderful moment where I met another ardent fan of the Mother 32. I went to a it's I mean, it's a Burning Man like thing. It's not related to Burning Man in any way, shape, or form. It's just another desert party, but it's called Neotropolis. It's a oh gosh, it's a cyberpunk party in the desert where costumes are mandatory.
That sounds like my kind of jam.
It's so much fun, and I didn't think to bring it. Well, I did bring a synth, technically, I guess. I may be the only person to have used the JU06A's speakers because I put picture hangers. Like I unscrewed the screws on the back, and I put like some picture hangers on it from Home Depot, and I put like a guitar strap around it, or actually that was a purse strap, and then I am lucky and blessed. Oh gosh, is it in the closet? It's in a closet. I am lucky and blessed to very long ago have been in a synth punk band, a comedy synth punk band, where we had a bass guitarist, and at the time I was able to snag a gosh, what's the model number on it? Like one of the very large black Korg guitars, like not the small ones. I'm talking the huge one. Those things are
Yeah.
unobtainium right now, and it's like 1 year older than I am, and it still works. So I plug that into the JU06A. We're out in the desert and it's battery powered, so I have my speakers already on there. And me and my friend, we dressed up as cyber nuns, and we they went around with sacramental wine, like offering people free drinks if they would like chug a lug. And so while they were doing it, I played these church chords on the guitar. Just like wah. There's I guess.
That's so good. That's so good. That's the way to do it with the speaker on your neck. Yeah, that's awesome.
So I actually
Um,
did use the speakers on the JU06A. And the what where this all speaks to though is there's so many ways to use a synthesizer, and not all of them even have to do with music. Like that was very much a performance, but the like I have a video on my channel where I used my synthesizer to play a game of SNES Tetris while also processing the audio coming out of the game. But the goal was to actually make a Tetris. Uh, and there's so many ways to use, especially Eurorack, because it's so open ended that I had to split everything in the guide into 5 parts. So there's that explorer. And once you start exploring, you'll generally start spilling into one of the other of the five, which are a musician, which is I want to treat my rack like an instrument, something that can be actively played, like I'm in the '90s acid scene. There's the composers who want to set up either an ecosystem that plays itself or interface it with a DAW, perhaps, for a more predictable experience, which you're not going to really get with Eurorack. I feel like I feel like if you're going to work with modular at all, you need to either be ready to lose anything that you've accomplished with it besides learning things, or just learn it so well like an instrument that you can get back a previous result just by being like, oh, I remember it was about this. Okay, cool.
yeah, and there's a few folks who do the latter pretty well, where they'll like make a very typically a very small case, and then it's done and it stays that way, and they'll like name it, and that's like one way to sort of do that. And I see a lot of folks, especially in some of the other discords, because EMS is a more performative discord, like folks are
Mhm.
playing more. But in other discords, they're like catching one shots. They're like making some crazy sound, recording it into a DAW, and then using that later in a song.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's so cool to see that the benefit of using Eurorack and just modular in general is that as I have in all of my albums, it gives everything a constantly moving and organic sound. I'm trying to remember who coined this rule. I wish I could credit them. That in drone you want to move slowly but keep moving. And I think that you should do the same thing for dark ambient and soundscaping and anything that you're doing. Do have an do have movement in there, but move slowly. And when you're turning these knobs, you get a non-mechanical feeling from an entirely electronic machine.
Yeah.
And that to me is just beautiful. Um, which brings me into the other two types that I didn't mention. There's the collector, which I did. We got plenty of those, and they know who they are. You know, like if you've ever been, if you're plunking down like for the Kickstarters on stuff, sound unheard. If you're just like, oh, I need to, I got to upgrade to V3 because V3 is cooler and neater. If you made your own unicorn boom, if you're making the prototypes at the Moog Fest, you're probably a collector. Uh,
Yeah.
just like that you want this giant buzzing battle station of fun, as I put it in the guide. That's definitely a kind of user. And the last, perhaps strangest kind of user, and one that I think I'm closer to than I wish to admit, is the modular fancier.
The
And
modular what?
the modular fancier. It's sort of like there are goldfish fanciers, and I wish I could think of a better term, but fancier works for it so well because fanciers are not concerned with the recordable output of their machine, but with the human machine interface that a modular provides. These are the people who want a holistic or non musical result from modular. Growing up near Sedona, I know that there's probably somebody using Eurorack to make like a binaural beat system for experimental therapy. There's ERD, whose stuff does everything from run things through that like a uranium core, or like sets things on fire, or runs it through dirt from Poe's grave. Like the people who are doing this have some inkling in them where there is a note of spirituality in it for them, that this is how they're getting in touch with some kind of man machine interface that is the romantic side of musicianship and modular itself. And those people, as you might imagine, need a completely different kind of case, a completely different kind of module ethos than any of the other types. Because what's going to work for a musician, if somebody like that asked a musician to design them a rack, they'd get a whole bunch of common modules that have very discrete, understandable purposes, and they'll just kind of get bored with it really quickly. I had that experience with the Kilpatrick Audio Phenol. Amazing way to get into banana synthesis, and I was just like, man, this is really boring because the thing that got me into bananas was looking at the stuff from Peter B, looking at the stuff from Buchla, all the stuff that sounds like it's from the planet Jupiter, and there's nothing more East Coast than the Kilpatrick Phenol. It was just like it threw me for a loop to have something that was both East Coast and bananas, and it was bananas, as they say. It was bananas to interact with it, and I tried to do weird things with it, and it just refused to get weird enough for me. And so I was like, well, I guess I learned something about myself today. Uh, I get a little inkling of that. I need the weird. I need something unlistenable for myself for those like deep delving sessions when I'm just drunk or high and entertaining myself on the modular. And I want to get those weird sounds. That's a fancier. And so so the types are explorer, composer, musician, fancier, and collector. And many people express traits from some or all of the types, but if you want to build a rack that really works for you, you kind of gotta pick a direction. And if you can't pick a direction, I suggest explorer. And I do have a bunch of general rules for keeping things from getting out of control as an explorer, so that you don't wind up with, like I said, the huge rack with no real purpose, that's just option paralysis and makes you wonder, like, could I sell some of this?
Yeah. Uh, I think there is a lot of crossover, like chat. Like, which of those things are you? I think everybody I think everybody probably has a little bit of collector in them, like where they buy a module sheerly because there's something about it that brings them joy that beyond its function. Like I saw a lot of people get the local florist because it's a beautiful panel. Like it's an awesome
Oh,
looking module. Very useful one, but like it's also very good looking and it's this nice shade of green that sticks out. You don't see it very often in modular. Um,
I
I
do
know
like
I
those
have some
brave
weird
colors.
stuff like that. I definitely go towards the musician route, but like in a more composery route, like I'm composing on the Hapax, right? And then using my instruments as an instrument, well, using my modular as an instrument, but like I don't. Yeah, I think as a musician, like the thing that matters to me most above all else is like how performable is it? And I say that a lot and it means a lot of different things to different people's, but like it needs to be useful to me in a performance or I'm not going to care about it. It's going to go.
Mhm. Or it's just gonna go. I had a collector moment with the spherical wavetable navigator. I it was back when I was definitely in my explorer phase. I didn't know what I was, I didn't know exactly where I was going, but I did see all the ads for the SWN, and I'm just like, oh, that rainbow ring. And I saw like a couple demos of it that made it seem really great.
That slightly squished circle, like it's one of the top coolest modules as far as looks and designs go. Like
No, no, it
hands down.
so is, and like wherever I put it, any module, sorry, any rack that you put either that or ironically an SMR with the same form factor and the same rainbow circle, that
Yes.
thing shines so bright in all of the colors that it looks like the crown jewel of any case. And it's so funny to me because there's the SMR, which is like it's almost notoriously one of the hardest modules to use effectively,
Yes.
and then you have the SWN, which I got, and it was gone like before the newness veneer of the module was gone. I just basically resold it at MSRP. It was in and
Yeah.
out so fast because I was like, oh yeah, 6 voices, any wave I want. It's wavetable. It's going to have the deepest bass. This is going to be amazing. I'm going to be able to like this will just be an oscillator bank. It doesn't. It doesn't do that very well.
It's one of those modules that's really cool from a concept standpoint, but like anytime I see it in a case, which is really easy to do because it's so obvious, it's rarely got patch cables in it. Like,
Yeah. And right now, I gotta admit, my SMR is unracked. I was using it as a kind of as a like it's not technically a fixed filter bank, but it can be used as a configurable fixed filter bank that you can then save the settings on.
yeah.
So that's not so bad. It's nice to have some kind of 6 band EQ, and that's what I've actually wound up using it for mostly. I kind of want to get it out just I've talked about challenging myself, and I like challenging myself with modular. A good challenge I think to undertake would be just get the SMR and get it to be a rings, because I think that that's what everybody wanted from it. That everybody who's kind of coming off probably, I think it's fair to call rings one of the most popular resonators in the
Yeah.
format,
Yep.
and because it's so easy to get good output from it, like you don't even need to give it a source. You don't even need to give it an in. You just give it. You don't need to give it gains. You just give it a sequence of volt per octave, and it outputs just the most beautiful, like string emulation that you've heard. I don't know if you've ever used a rings though, but just the design on rings is just perfect. It almost prepares you for disappointment with the rest of the format. I think it's one of Emily's best designs.
I've never used a rings. The closest I've come to any mutable instruments oscillator is Micro Freak, and the I think the Dirty Wave M8 might use a macro oscillator or something. And then I just recently, like last year, picked this up towards the end of the year, and I need to plug
Hey.
it in somewhere. But braids is the one that attracts me the most because I have a panel for Cosmo that I can swap this out into, which I should just do tonight.
Oh my god. And the
Just
MIDI
a little
polyphony in
soldering.
Eurorack is yeah, it's so hard to do. If I think wait no, braids is the other plate. Sorry, I'm thinking of yarns.
Yeah, braids is like pre-plates,
Yeah.
plats.
Yeah, lots of people don't like lots of people don't like plaits. They prefer braids. I haven't tried braids yet, but it's open source, so I can get around to it.
Yeah, I just like the screen for braids and the sounds that it makes, particularly that vocal synth. So if when this is plugged in, you can shame me for it always being on the vocal synth. um, it's just gonna be that. Um, I'm okay with that. It sounds great.
Oh yeah, no.
Um,
Wherever it feels like it belongs. And I just gotta shout out that the absolute Chad move of releasing 8 new synthesis modes for the
oh my
plate
god.
because they thought the plates was so good that they're like something's going to go wrong. And there was that some drama with the micro freak and
Yeah.
Arturia.
Yep.
So they were kind of correct. And so then like after all was said and done, Mutable closes shop. They're like, by the way, here's my secret firmware for plates that has like FM modes and DX7 emulation, and you can upload DX7 patches to it.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, that thing's in my live case. Are you kidding me? This is like Christmas. I got a free module.
You got like 8 free modules. Like
Yeah.
that's a sick combo. Um Yeah, so for backing up to the Arturia thing, that was a whole mess because someone in the Arturia marketing department, I think in their marketing materials for the Micro Freak wrote like in collaboration with mutable instruments, right? Which isn't quite accurate. Collaboration requires one person to actually talk to another person, and
Yeah.
that didn't happen. So I think that got
Yeah. I
eventually fixed,
remember it was
but
like Emily was like, they never actually talked to me. And then the marketing department was like, oh yeah, I kind of didn't talk to anybody. So there was like a communication breakdown there in the
yeah,
promotion.
don't do that.
No.
um, But yeah, let's go back to your tips
Oh.
for what was it? It
Um,
was tips for organizing your case as uh, as an explorer, right?
as an explorer, I was going to say, actually, go ahead and pick any of the archetypes, and I'll give you my thoughts on them since we still have some time here.
What do
Yeah,
you think,
give me any
chat?
of
What do
those
you want to
archetypes,
hear
and I'll go
most?
off
Let's
on it.
start with the explorer, and while
All
we're
right.
talking, you can pick another. They can pick another archetype.
So in the explorer section, I have a couple tips for picking modules. One is something that you may already be doing, but you want to like stop yourself from getting the new shinies. uh, where something comes out and it's like, well, I already have an oscillator, but you can never have too many VCOs. That attitude is just like predominant, especially in new synthesis. That it's like, well, you need sound sources, so I'm going to get like 5 VCOs, but then you have like a filter and maybe one LFO or modulation point. And a better way to think about it when you're an explorer is like, yes, you want a whole bunch of cool, complex VCOs, but the beauty of Eurorack, as you'll find when you're patching it, is in the complexity of the modulation that you can get from sub audio rates to audio rates to all of the things that aren't even like audio rate that answer to some other force of the universe, like a plant. When you get stuff like that, you unlock things in your other modules. I remember when I was new, I just puzzled out a Mother 32. I didn't know why everything had to have this stupid FM input, right? Because I'm just using the VOCT input. And once I discovered what FM was, because I got a digitone, I'm like, wait, can I do this on the modular? And I tried it. I'm like, oh, this is a whole skill set. And then I discovered why there are mathematical divisions on an ornament in crime. So if you happen to have an ornament in crime and you wondered why those mathematical divisions are there, it's not even because of like, well, somebody will want to, somebody will want to compose a song in the Fibonacci sequence. Here you go. You can use those mathematical divisions in their quantum on the OC to manage FM relationships.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the thing about FM. Like, if you just get started, if you jack anything into that FM input, especially if it's linear FM, I believe, um, it's going to sound probably bad to you. Like, you're going to be like, how do I use this? Um, like, there's a learning curve on it. But um, if you've got a nice division, particularly FM likes divisions, you can start getting some pleasing overtones and things like that because they're like a third or a fifth or whatever.
Yep, you got it. And another thing I mentioned for explorers, which definitely works into FM, is you can't really start with FM unless you have an oscilloscope. And especially if you're just learning modular, get an oscilloscope. If you want to get into like FM or like advanced modulation techniques, get an oscilloscope or some way to monitor your modular on a scope. And if you are experienced, get a scope, especially if you're an explorer, because it's fun. It's another way to explore the sound visually. And if you have an XY mode on that oscillator, which, as far as I know, is functionally useless, it just looks cool. You can get into oscilloscope art if you want to go really hard on it. Or you can just enjoy the weird shapes that the sounds that you're making create in a two-dimensional space.
Yeah, so XY stuff is huge for me. Like, I love doing it, and I've been trying to like figure out how to do it nicely with samples. You can do it with us oscillate, like you can do it with two sine waves, right? Like just two sine waves, one in each channel, detune one, watch the circle spin in a 3D fashion. Very cool. And so on and so forth. You can make really cool stuff. But oscilloscope music is a whole topic I'd be happy to talk about in another one because I
Oh,
could go
oh
for a
gosh,
long time.
I would have nothing to say about it because I haven't like that. That feels like I'm gonna get really dorky here. If you ever played Final Fantasy Tactics, where you got to master 5 jobs before you can be a Dark Knight, and then you master Dark Knight, and then you're like a Moon Knight or something, then
It is that you have to get this software that hasn't been updated in a few years and also learn what is it? Name of that software that I use for 3D stuff. One of the 3D softwares that I have in here. So if you learn a 3D software,
oh
you've got to
god,
like learn how to like you if you've got a Mac, loop back, if you've got Windows, you got to figure out how to like audio route to your DAW probably. Um, and then somehow preview on the oscilloscope. Like it's a whole thing. Anyway, that's what goes into when I make like words on the screen.
it is a whole thing, and I found out in VCV Rack. That's part of why I'm making the guide. I'm making the guide format neutral, even though most of my experience is with Eurorack. I've done some stuff with bananas, and I've been to NobCon, so I got to play on somebody's Weird. But it's mostly about Eurorack and VCV because I feel like if we're going, I'm very concerned with expanding the community because since finding this, I'm like, I think more people would enjoy this. And VCV, it isn't as fun. It isn't as fun as a physical machine, not in the least. But so many people have become enamored by VCV. We have so many people on EMS who just do VCV patches. I bump into people on YouTube who do unattended modular ambient on VCV. Clearly, it has enough there to be interesting for for the people who like the modular composition
Yeah.
form.
Yeah.
And
And
so if you have VCV, always use an oscilloscope. If you have an oscilloscope, always use an oscilloscope, especially if you're going to be messing around with FM, because when you're an explorer, you might look over to the oscilloscope like me and be like, hey, that looks like a lotus flower. Wait a minute, wait a minute. And then you start tweaking some of the envelopes you have going through there and your waveforms, like trying to make it look a little more like a flower. And then you're like, oh, this is actually very slowly spinning. What's controlling that? And so then you get it like spinning and blooming. And somewhere I have a GIF that I took of a VCV scope of like a of an oscilloscope art Lotus that I'd accidentally made just by messing around with FM stuff in
It's so good.
VCV.
It's so
Yeah,
good, and it
and I
helps
want to
you
use that.
understand, like I think it helps me understand a little bit more about the waveforms, and more importantly, like, what am I effing up? So, like, that PWM knob, if you turn it too far on a lot of, synthesizers and modules, will go to silence, and that's actually a really useful tool sometimes. But, but you get that really thin sound and you're like, why is it so thin? But when you actually look at it on the screen, you'll see it goes from like this rectangle like this, it gets thinner and thinner and thinner until there's just a line, and you're like, okay, I understand now.
And I specifically mentioned in the guide the hypnotic effects of watching a supersaw on an oscilloscope.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's like, yeah,
there's little jokes sprinkled throughout the guide. I also suggest that explorers should try at least once low passing a saw wave. Uh,
yeah,
it's a rite of passage. You got to do it.
yeah. Um, yeah. Did y'all pick an archetype? I don't think you did. But there is a question.
Oh,
Jay Blanco asked, "What's the difference between like? Can you expand on the differences between a musician and a composer?"
yeah. So this was one that was one category, and then I had to split it because they had completely different needs. And I can best describe it by the two machines behind me. Let me see if I can do this without like deactivating my camera. The two behind me here, we have this one, which has a performance mixer. You can see that pretty plainly. I got the mod map on there. Uh, I've I keep meaning to go get some stuff for a perma patch because you can get some what's the word? You can get some clips that go around your cables and
Mhm,
like screw in with your M3 screws and will like hold
mhm.
them all in place.
Yep.
So I'm thinking of perma patching this thing for good so that all of the knobs are accessible. It's a playable device that just off the top of my head, I can be like, okay, change up this gate pattern, make this noise hat like ring a little bit farther, and I'm going to run this through this effects chain. And that all happens within the space of a second because I'm just reaching around and changing it while I'm building up a noise, like while I'm building up like a noise wall with my other hand for like a big drop. And those elements are muted, but I know what's going to come out of it because I've solidified the instrument to the point where like, okay, and this is going to come out what happens when I have the bass drum at 50% through the first FX chain on the fourth preset, and I'm going to load this preset that I have of like a song that's ready to go because maybe I got a little too experimental with it and it's starting to sound like an Autechre album, and that's not the vibe I'm going for. So it needs to be something that's playable, is my point. It's something that both hands can be on it. I know what the things on it do. I'm not menu diving.
Yeah.
Like I love my PAMs. Love my PAMs, especially early on. It was basically every single patch. I don't want to deal with that live. You don't want to be diving in menus when you're playing live as a musician because, like, you just you have a loop going. Maybe you have some variation in there because you've patched it well, but it's you don't want to be fiddling with a little thing. You want to be like you want to have that DJ energy when you're
Right.
playing
And
live. You
and
want to be
beyond the
out
menu
there.
thing, like it
Yeah,
can't like change clock divisions or whatever in a way that interrupts the flow of the current music, right? Like that's really notable when you're doing that kind of stuff. And you're trying to get like, I don't know if Pam's does this, but like on a lot of my sequencers, they'll go from like a 16th note to like uh, a 12 to an 8. Like there's that triplet bit in between those, and if you hit that, it really messes things up in between when you're trying to double speed or something.
yeah, and stuff that like desyncs. It
Yeah,
just it becomes really messy, and so there's a different goal there. So
yeah,
to put it as concisely as I can, a musician is playing the Eurorack like an instrument, like just as a guitar has strings, a piano has keys, what have you. I guess there's other instruments out there. You can interact with it in a very direct way, which results in a musical output. And when I say musical output, let's be real, we're we're dealing within the Western realm of tet music, probably. If you're doing techno, you can get a little weirder with it, but you need to get something musical out of it. It probably has musical divisions. So a composer is a completely different kind of archetype because immediacy doesn't mean much to a composer. A composer is the person, you're writing down the notes. Composers are people who come at Eurorack from this place of, well, it's funny. I was talking to somebody who's probably going to wind up in the special thanks for the book, Pruggy Boob. I actually did a case
Yeah.
reorganization for him as well.
Yeah.
And he was talking about the YouTube sphere of, and I'm sure that most people in Eurorack probably watch this stuff too. There's a whole sphere of YouTubers who talk about advanced music theory, stuff like non-functional harmony and the Coltrane changes, and like what a key signature change did to the girl from Ipanema. You'll find people talking about these niche things of composition that are like, oh, this person uses like shared notes in just the parent scales and then like ventures out of those scales, but has like the bass on like a Dorian and then has like Mixolydian on the lead. And that creates this feeling. And people who come at modular see these advanced quantizers that are like, oh, I can do both at the same time, or like or a chord oscillator that it's like, oh, like you can that's another challenge I wanted to challenge myself with. I wanted to see if I can make a modular do the Coltrane changes, and it's not easy even on modular, but you can come at music from a compositional point of view. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to learn to, like interface directly with the strings, directly play the knobs, directly bang on a drum, but I do want to compose these things that I'm seeing in the musical sphere, and my friends won't sit still enough to hear me talk about it. So you have this modular that you can then take all of that advanced knowledge with and run your own experiments on. When you learn about how to accomplish non-functional harmony in a composition, you can use generative elements to make that happen without actually composing anything. You're not even writing down notes. You just gave it a set of rules and let it go. And that's a completely different set of modules, a different set of needs, and a different rack than what a musician needs. You might have a part of a live thing that does a bit of that you maybe like crossfade in for like your transitions. I could absolutely see that. Maybe there's one piece that's different every time, and that's how you do it. But outside of that, you definitely want something that you can change up on the fly and play as an instrument that you know in and out as a musician. As a composer, you probably want a deeper experience with deep menus, lots of possibility that's going to keep you coming back and provide you with those fun little puzzles to solve of how to accomplish things like the Coltrane changes, like going around the circle of fifths. And Ornament and Crime has like what, like three kinds of chord modes, like all
Right.
sorts of
So I
stuff.
think a composer and an explorer have a lot of similarities, with the composer being like, there's probably a lot of overlap in module selection, with the composer being like, I have specific intent I'm going in with, and I am going to use these modules to accomplish that. Whereas the explorer is the one like playing with PAMs. Maybe that accidental um, clock division shift made things awesome, like that kind of
Yeah,
thing.
just hunting for happy accidents, and happy accidents do happen as a musician, but they're all heart stopping, especially if you're playing live.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, live, there are occasional happy accidents live, right? Like, I hit the wrong button and mute everything on the last bar of a 4-bar phrase.
Oh gosh,
Sometimes that works. It's like a bass drop, and then when the next thing comes in, it like works. That kind of stuff I would consider a happy accident. Like, still makes me like get a little too adrenaline up, but that kind of stuff is usable. Whereas sometimes it like, if I kept the resonant too high on something and go into a bass octave or something with the same voice, now I'm getting crazy levels of feedback that in a in-person scenario where I don't necessarily have a limiter on things, like that can be problematic in an unhappy way for people's ears.
Yeah, so many times I'll do some Discord busking, I call it, for the places that let you go places and like just play music on
Yeah,
Discord.
yeah,
I'll occasionally go into those servers for a little bit and just wire up some stuff from scratch and just get the oohs and ahs and some occasional album sales. And it's great to see people who have no idea what they're looking at. Like getting into it. That inspired a lot of the book too. That it's like, how can you introduce someone to what they're even looking at when they see all these little rectangles? Uh, but yeah, no. The I had one the other day where I hadn't used that particular case in a very long time. I forgot to plug it into the mixer. Everything was full volume. Thankfully, nobody was looking yet. I used the wrong module for the wrong job a couple times, and I wound up in a case with a bloom using an LFO and a quantizer for generative Voct, like
yeah,
signal.
yeah. I mean, I did the
It was a
intro to
mess.
this with just heavy breathing and button sounds, so you know, like mess ups happen. But yeah, I think Explorer is like for me, like that's a case I would like to get. Like, I think that's the highest on my list of a case to sort of make at some
Mhm.
point, like a small, think like a make noise. Shared system, or like I forget the name of their other one. There's another one that's a little more exploratory, like something like that. Not necessarily make noise, but like something where it's like the soft pop. It misbehaves, and I have to have a conversation with it, and I can find some cool stuff that way.
Absolutely, and you actually might enjoy some stuff from the fancier archetype inside of that Explorer case.
Yeah,
Uh, for explorers, just some quick tips that are also in the guide for explorers are if you can, don't go above 12U if you're still just exploring, because I feel like 90% of the world of synthesis, at least in most formats, can be accomplished in 12U. Whatever the format offers, if you go above that, you're either going into a collector sphere or like you want something for mixing and mastering. So you're going into the more like you're trying to release stuff. So try to keep it small and focused so you know the toolkit that you have at any point in time and what that toolkit needs so that you can effectively explore. Uh, to find out what that toolkit needs, throw a multifunction in there, even just a small one. They're okay at doing a whole lot of things, stuff like the disting currently. It's stuff like I'm trying to think of another good one. Ornament and Crime is another good one too, now that I think about it, especially hemispheres, where if you throw a multifunction inside your Explorer case and it's like, man, I never take that thing off the VCA, or I never take that thing off the envelope generator, or the panner, or whatever it seems to get stuck on, and you never move it off. It's like that's the time to be. That's the time where you got to ask yourself, well, should I actually go get some more VCAs, free this up, and let it, let this divining rod, I call it a compass in the guide. Let this be my compass again for where this Explorer case needs to go.
that's super good advice. Like that's how I used maths. Like it was
Oh,
in the case, and I didn't know how to use it, and then it was in the case, and I found out what slew was, and it was only on slew for like I don't know, 6 months after that. It was slew duty for two different voices. And I was like, maybe I can just build a slew module. Because
yeah.
like, and then it was
That's
on like adding duty, adding two signals together. Okay, for like 6 months. Maybe I need one that just does that, like that kind of thing.
and what a clout move using maths as a multifunction module. You absolutely can. It just requires you to really know synthesis in order to do it.
I didn't. I'd learn like
Really?
I'd watch like a how to use maths video or something, and they'd like
Oh,
lose me
okay,
after
okay.
they did anything advanced. But I'd see like, oh, slew. I know I can hear a sound change because they did that, and that's like two cables and one not like a knob, right? Like it's not much to it. I guess in maths case it's two knobs, one for the rise and one for the fall. But it was I learned maths through these like use cases
Oh
over
yeah.
time.
And I can recommend one for you right now, and it is not a well-known module. Um, I've been calling it it's a bit of a sleeper module. I feel right now you can still kind of get them. I've been calling it the maths of VCAs. Warm Star Electronics makes a thing called the Bends, and it is insane. So what it is it's basically uh, four attenuators all next to each other with positive and negative outputs. And there are six additional inputs which cause the ins to bleed into the outs of other channels. And I call it the maths of VCAs because on its face, like maths, like you hear about people all the time who go on YouTube to get their modular advice and that's really where it is at the moment. And they're like, maths is the you've got to get a maths. And if you're new to synthesis, you're going to be using it as two LFOs from the green raw outputs. The rest of it makes no sense. And so, and that's a very, very common experience. And then you grow into maths. You get to know and learn and love maths and figure out why I once did the calculations by space and HP and by price. It really is a bargain for everything that it can do. But if you don't know how to unlock it, it really is just kind of, it's just two slews. It's just two envelopes. And
Yeah,
it's not
like
like a
I don't think
compressor.
maths as an module people I don't recommend that as a module people should get when they're first starting. Like it is a
Yeah.
great module, and I do think folks should at least take a look at a maths or a maths clone or a function generator that has some similar fun or things like that. But
Delta
like
V.
it is not one you should start with.
Whenever I get the chance, when the odd person is doing their due diligence and they go into a modular server and they're like, "Hey guys, I'm getting my first modular. Should I get a maths?" I'm like, "Don't get a maths. Stick with me. Get a delta V," which is so demystifying for early synthesis because it's most of a maths, but without the center channels and the offsets, as well as two VCAs, which is really handy when you're first learning synthesis, that you don't need to worry about the relationship between your envelope generator and your VCA. They're packed into one module. So it gets you running really quickly. And then when you do go modular with those two discrete functions, then you can be like, oh, I just need the envelope part of it, or I just need the VCA part of it. If you are new and you are thinking of starting with a maths, highly recommended Delta V. But we got it up on the screen. So the Warm Star Electronics,
Oh,
the
sorry.
band.
No, we
Oh
already
no,
talked
this is
about
awesome.
Wormstar. We got it. We're good. That's now on my list. And Forrestine asked like how many function generators have come out since they got mass, and like there's so many cool ones that I could just list off the top of my head. Like on my list, if I was going to swap out mass, it'd be for like a phalastry or maybe like function junction or something. But
Oh
like
yeah,
I don't think it
Rampage.
really matters for me. Like mass is fine. I think it's worth the space for me. I'm not worried about 2 HP or anything like that. But
And
Clarv, there's a bunch of good ones.
yeah, there's a bunch of good ones, and it's funny because like now that I'm thinking in the the five types of synthesizers archetypes, each one like kind of has a different, better purpose.
Yeah,
Maths is great for exploring because it's such a jack of all trades.
yeah,
All of the comparators and gates and all that extra stuff that you have inside of a Befico Rampage.
yeah.
And
Rampage
that
is sick.
Yeah, Rampage is great, and it's perfect for generative applications.
Yeah,
If you have some sort of unpredictable bit in there, then you can then you can like use the outputs, the incidental outputs of the maths that you're not using. It's like, oh, I got this spare gate. I want something to happen occasionally. You got that on the Rampage. There's the Marv, and isn't there a Carve as well with a Q? Am I thinking of something
it's
different?
QARV. Yeah,
Yeah,
and that one's
man.
pretty
There's a
rad. It's four function generators, all I think attack release. I don't remember how the signal mixing works on that one, but yeah, uh, it's quad attack release slash VCA and tons more. Like there's tons of cool stuff out there that you can replace with, and I think a lot of these modules have shine at one or more of the archetypes more than others, right? Like I wouldn't say maths is performative for the
And
most
it's
part.
funny you mention that. I wouldn't say maths is performative, but for the longest time, all of my hats were managed by a Delta V because it's so easy to run any noise source. Because, like, how many semi-modulars you got with a noise out that you don't use all the time? You can either run that through a filter or run it through literally nothing and just into a function generator with a VCA. And you can use that for everything from hats to risers. Like that when you're building up right before for a bass drop, you can make it a crash cymbal with like a longer decay. It's a noise voice that you have immediate control over, and it's like
Yes.
nothing to wire it up or unwire it if you want to be patching on the fly.
Yeah.
So yeah, like each one like seems to speak to different needs, and that's how I wanted to write the guide. To say like, look, everybody's got different needs. You know what your needs are. You go read that section, and this is how you can design a case that's going to work for you. So that way you don't get caught up in like the maths hype machine, which no, make noise, make your money, but uh, so you don't get caught up in that hype machine and think that maths is something that's required to start doing modular synthesis, and you really don't need a maths. It's a good idea to have a function generator, I guess, but I wouldn't start with it.
All right, I want to keep going because this is like an awesome conversation, but I have to go do dinner stuff.
Oh,
So
absolutely. Oh yeah, we went over. Oh gosh, I got lost
we've
in the
gone
thought.
over. Yeah, I
Yeah.
I I can feel the hanger coming. Like fuck maths. Let's get rid of maths. Let's burn down maths. Wait, I
No,
like maths. What am I
no, no.
so
I
angry?
love math. Once you're in intermediate synthesis, you're ready for math. It's so useful.
Yeah, it's a fantastic module. Um, all right. So, yeah, thanks for coming on. You got to be on more of these, but you also have your own competitive show, What the Deaths, that is now weekly,
Well,
right?
it's the Sunday Massive. Everybody's naming their channels what the in the Discord. Sunday Massive at
Yeah.
2 p.m. every Sunday, more or less. I go on breaks when life stuff happens, but
Yes.
uh, it's the modular show that is different every single week. Uh, I don't know. I
You got to
usually
be
don't know what I'm
careful.
going to be doing until I turn on the camera. So every week it's different. Um, if there's any theme, I genre hop. One of the things I'm proud of in my live case is that it can do almost every single EDM genre that I can personally name. And so I'll do a genre that I haven't done before and start wiring that up and just figuring out while I'm on stream what it takes to make that genre happen in modular. Uh, or you might catch me on the weird ones where I'm making it play Tetris, where I'm just like, I'm under the weather. I'm going to make some music like there is in Yume Nikki, kind of thing. You never know what you're going to get. One time I did a big case build on it. It changes every time, so show up for mass, uh, and you'll have a fun time. There's usually a rowdy crowd in chat commenting on what's going on, and I always take requests. So.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. Usually I have that on like when I'm doing Sunday like chore.
Oh,
Anyway, I gotta run. I guess I'll try to play the outro. Yeah, I'll try an
oh yeah,
outro. Why
give
not?
it a
Like,
shot. I want to hear. I
change
want to
my
hear the
audio
compliment.
now so I don't f this up.
You got it.